good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you at our FP&A Circle. My name is Olga Rudakova, and I'll be your facilitator for the event. Let me welcome our attendees from Nordic, from Benelux, from UK and Ireland regions. But not only them, we actually have 250 registrations from 33 different countries today. You are all welcome. And you know what? I'm not surprised at all, since today's topic is quite interesting. Today we are speaking about Agile FP&A Ecosystem for Scenario Management. So let me start by a brief overview of previous topics we had in the circle. You see all the topics at the screen, and if you are interested in any of them, at least in digital ones, you can definitely access the recording at our webpage. So don't hesitate and do so. What we can expect today at our event. Today we'll stop for a while to reflect at the question, how can FP&A agility be measured? We will definitely speak about scenario planning and how to start small and why should we start small. We'll speak about improving validity and relevance of your scenarios. We will cover reduction of risk, effort, and time spent in scenario modeling. We'll have conclusion and recommendations and definitely a Q&A session. It is time for me now to introduce our speakers, our dear panelists. So please join me here on camera, and I will start introducing you one by one. Our first speaker for today's event will be Bartosz Obojski. Bartosz is a director for global finance, planning and analysis at Esko. Bartosz is based in Brussels in Belgium. He's active in FP&A and finance business partnering, and he has rich experience in an international multicultural corporate environment. Bartosz, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. Thank you very much.
Our second speaker today will be Harsh Amarasuriya. Harsh is Global Head of FP&A, Finance Transformation and Data Strategy at Clyde Co. Harsh has over 20 years of finance experience. He has developed extensive experience being a key strategic finance business partner to senior management at multiple multinational organizations. Harsh, thank you for accepting our invitation today.
Thank you, and glad to be here.
And the last speaker for the evening will be Sean Salminen. Sean is responsible for pre-sales and customer success at Mercur Solutions UK. Sean has almost a decade of experience with scoping, designing, and implementing solutions for FP&A and other finance department use cases. Sean, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to this webinar.
You know what, I'm looking forward to and to all your practical experience. Before we share that, let me briefly introduce our FP&A Trends group through some statistics we have. We are proud to share that we had already 269 face-to-face meetings since April 2016. We are catching up on our webinars as well. We had 168 till now. And if you want to join our FP&A Club LinkedIn group, you will be one of 53,000 members by now. So please do so and join us if you're not there yet. What we can expect at this session, first of all, that is 90 minutes event. You will take part in 3 polls on the webinar subject. We will have interactive Q&A session, so you can ask questions via chat starting right now, so please do so. Networking. We do encourage you connect directly with our speakers through LinkedIn. They are ready for that. Presentation is already available in handout section. And more than that, you will receive the recording and copy of this presentation within 2 days after this meeting. Before you leave, at the very end, please take a short survey after this session. Your feedback is very important and truly helps us improve and make these webinars better. I would like to thank our technology sponsor for making this event possible. Mercur is a leading provider of corporate performance management solutions for mid-sized and large enterprises. And before I give word to our panelists, I would like to stop for a second and reflect on the question: how can FP&A agility be measured? I would argue that practically anything can be measured, but we need to define it first. And when we think about agility, we usually think about it as an ability to quickly react to changes. And that speed becomes crucial in our management and becomes a good proxy for measuring agility. If you think about how long does it take us to run scenarios, the numbers are quite disappointing. These numbers are based at 2024 FP&A Trends Survey. And they actually tell us that only 22% of respondents can run scenario in less than 1 day. There's actually only 4% being able to do that in real time. And that is quite disappointing, right? We want to react to changes much quicker than that. Today we'll speak about how can we achieve that? How can we get closer to this ideal speed? Either through finding a shortcut or maybe through deploying technology solution. So let's see what options we have. And we will start with the first presentation today. Bartosz Obojski will be speaking about scenario planning and how to start small and why. So Bartosz, the stage is yours.
Hey, thank you very much, Olga. So once again, thank you for having me here. Good morning, good afternoon. Yes, so what I wanted to speak about today is basically how to start with the financial scenario planning. And I think it's a topic currently very often discussed in the finance community, and lots of organizations would like to start using this approach, the scenario planning. But I think quite often it seems like a big project, kind of a big investment in technology, training people, and so on. And I think it does not have to be. At the very, very beginning, there are ways that you can start implement and start using the scenario planning without all this process and technology up front. And there are certain benefits to it, even if you start small, because, well, first of all, you can start now. You don't have to wait. You can use these simplistic methodologies to build culture in the company, to build acceptance for this new concept of scenario planning within your teams and within your business. And you can start on a journey, actually, a journey that takes you to a place that the company is accepting the solution once you're ready to make the investment. So how to start small? Well, I would say, first of all, put aside the idea of having a very flexible and dynamic system that would allow for a bottom-up consolidation. I think you'll see an example of such a system later today, but at the very, very beginning, you can probably even get started without this. You would normally build your usual forecast or a plan or a budget, a financial plan that you always do, and then you'd have to create a mechanism that would allow for a top-down adjustments to be applied to this initial plan, either positive or negative, and these adjustments applied to your base scenario would then lead to an alternative version of the plan, right? It's a simplistic, very simplistic approach, but would still be relevant and would still produce certain alternatives to the base case, let's say. Thus would present a scenario, one of the scenarios that you would consider. Okay, so what would be the mechanism that you would use to apply these top-down adjustments? probably different ones they can think of, but I think one of them, in my opinion, the easiest one, most of us already have, is the so-called risks and opportunities view or risks and opportunities slide that we very often have in our organizations. So what you could do to start using it as a first step towards the scenario planning would be, for example, to set a common format to be used for the whole organization, so the inputs are easier for you to consolidate on a total level. You could, well, create categories of input parameters that you would like to test or that you would like to change. Depends on how your forecasting model looks like. You could have some external items like market growth, could be more internal like costing, pricing, could be those categories of impacts that would change your plan. You could also add further P&L dimensions to be more specific. You could potentially start with just one, like revenue. You could have different scenarios for revenue, but you could expand it towards margins, costs, OPEX, I don't know, potentially even OP. So that is a further improvement of this. You can also assign owners for the key areas of categories. You could involve sales, marketing, R&D in generating these scenarios. And I think the one of the key aspects here would be, especially at the very beginning, to implement a iterative process. So basically start using this extended, let's say, risks and opportunities approach of generating scenarios, but try to improve cycle after cycle. So basically, see what works, see what level of detail is meaningful, see which parameters actually work, which are changing, and how you capture the changes in revenues, margins, or costs. So I think the iterative aspect of this change would be very important, especially at the beginning. And then what you could do is basically combine the impacts of all these different risks and opportunities into positive impacts and negative impacts. And by doing that, you could channel the individual risks and opportunities into impacts that would be applied on the base scenario and would lead to a high scenario, like a more opportunistic view, and a low scenario, more pessimistic view. And in that way, you would generate the first, I would say, standard base versions of scenario planning, where you have your base case, but next to it, you'd have a low case and a high case. So low would be obviously the situation where the risks materialize, and then you might use that scenario to start thinking with your business how you would react. I don't know what costs you would cut, what other actions you would take in response. And obviously the high scenario would be the optimistic version where more volume would materialize or costs would be lower, and then you would start thinking, okay, how do I react in this scenario? Do I increase investments? Do I use other opportunities that I would not be able to use if this wouldn't materialize? So basically, this gives you an opportunity to start using the process, to start using the scenario planning together with the business without having the whole apparatus, without having the systems and all the training and all the bigger things that you need in place that we normally think about when we think about implementing scenario planning. In a short summary of this presentation, I would say, well, obviously, in the current volatile environment, it's difficult to get the plan right. There will always be variances, and I think nowadays the variances might be higher than expected. So I think the better way to prepare is for managing this uncertainty is basically to have some additional scenarios and to pre-plan how you would react in a high and low case. You can start this without actually having the full-blown system backup behind you. I would say it's a journey that it's a journey that you continue on. Start with the culture, move through a process, and then eventually you end up implementing the required technology. And I would encourage to constantly iterate and refine the process. And I think the biggest benefit of starting simplistic, even with such a building on something that already exists on the RNOs, is basically getting the organization and the process ready for a time that when the technology becomes available to you, the company, the organization is used to using that, and actually I think can also more precisely define what they would expect from such a system. So I think that's worth considering. With that, I think, Olga, it's back to you. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Bartosz, for sharing your practical experience, how you run scenarios at the moment. And what I really like about that is that you start with building a culture, with changing mindset, so that you are ready for technology. In reality, it's much faster to deploy technology than change people's mindset or a company culture. So you're on a good way to get there. For all the rest of us, it's clear that we cannot say any longer that we cannot run scenarios. We can, at least in a very simplistic form. If you have any questions to Bartosz at this stage, please ask him already through chat, and we will answer all these questions through during our Q&A session at the very end. Meanwhile, let me ask you a question. What's going to happen next is a polling question that I will share with you right now. So let me start our first poll. And that is about how would you rate your scenario planning maturity? And we have 4 options here: advanced and automated, structured but manual, basic with gaps, or non-existent at all. I'm very curious to see your answers, how the votes will split. So how would you rate your scenario planning maturity? Is it advanced and automated? Is it structured but manual? Is it basic but with gaps, or non-existent at all? Most of you have voted already, and let me end this poll and share the results with everyone. We have actually 2 winners. We don't have a definite winner here. Structured but manual got 40% of your votes, and basic with gaps got 38%, so almost equal results. Basically normal distribution here. We have advanced and automated in 9% of cases and non-existent at all at 18% of cases. Bartosz, what do you think? Are you surprised by those results?
Well, I don't know. I think it's what's quite encouraging is that, non-existent is only 13%. So apparently, well, obviously lots and lots of us see the benefit of the scenario planning, right? So that's why people start, working on it, implementing it. And okay, it's also, I think, a matter of subjective judgment if you are structural but manual or basic with gaps. But I think that means, 40 plus 38, what is it, 78%? Well, 3/4 of us are using it, if not fully automated, then to some extent already. So I think that is very encouraging, actually, I think. And that is a bit surprising. It's a big portion, I think. So, yeah, very interesting.
Indeed, I fully agree. It's actually more positive than we expected. So let me close this poll. And on that optimistic note, let's move on to our first discussion of the evening. And we will speak about culture. Bartosz already started this discussion, how to start changing your culture with some basic risks and ops and for some high and low scenarios. So what I will ask everyone, so please join me here on the camera. What I will ask our panelists now is, how do you foster a culture that embraces scenario-based decision making? So kind of changes our decision making towards scenarios. And let me start with you, Harsh. What do you think? How we can foster such a culture?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I always advocate that scenarios need to be used, and particularly if it's used by senior management or peers, it's always made more relevant. And when you have those sort of business discussions, when you do at least reference the different scenarios you have within the business, I think it becomes part of your culture, because everyone becomes used to being asked, what is your alternate scenario, what's your low or high scenario, and it needs to become part of your normal sort of language in a business. And it shouldn't be left to a once a year exercise where you do all these scenarios and you never talk about it again. Then I think it doesn't become part of your culture.
Right, right. Very good piece of advice from you, Harsh. Let's move on to Sean. Sean, what do you think? How we can foster such a culture that kind of moves us towards scenario-based decision making?
Well, I think I'll build on Harsh's comment there. I think for one part is ease of making the scenarios. So especially if you're asking people who are not finance people, or they're not used to working in technical systems or even spreadsheets, you need to make it user friendly. Otherwise, it's always going to seem a struggle, a pain, a task that nobody wants to touch. They'll do the minimum effort. But the other part, I think, what Harsh is saying is really sort of use the end result, discuss them, but also, even for a single person, they should gain some insight from their own work. So when they actually put in the effort, they should be able to reap something from that. So they put in the work to do a simulation or a scenario plan, and they can then, end of quarter, end of month, end of period, end of year, they should be able to look at it and analyze and see, oh, these were my assumptions and I was right, wrong, why. So if you get that part in there, I think it's going to be sort of a self-feeding thing that's going to start building out from there. So you just need to put the things in place to feed that.
Right, right. Thank you for that answer. And back to you, Bartosz. I know that you have answered this question partially through your presentation already, but if you want to give us a piece of advice, how to foster such a culture, what should we do?
There are probably different approaches, but I liked what Harsh was saying about keeping it relevant. And to me, relevant is also to make it to build a mechanism that allows you for building the scenarios in a reasonable time. Because as you have shown at the very beginning of this presentation, if there are organizations who need more than a week, for example, to build a alternative scenario, then first of all, it becomes a little bit too much of a burden for the involved people. And on the other hand, it's available already too late, right? Because you're almost entering the new forecasting cycle. So if it's more than a week, then it means something's wrong. Either the process is too complex, the tool is too slow, or we want too much from this approach. To keep it relevant, I think it has to be, I don't know, be able to be run within a day. That will probably make sense.
Right, thank you. And I will remember this word relevant. I think that's something that's already started to repeat itself during this event. And let's see if we come back to that thought again. But right now we are moving to second presentation for the event, and that will be given to us by Harsh Amarasuriya. Harsh is going to speak about improving validity and relevance of your scenarios. So Harsh, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Olga. And I think I'll start with validity, because I suppose, as all of us know, we can spend a lot of time on various scenarios or budgeting, forecasting, and sometimes, people will disregard them or discount them for various reasons. So I always think, you got to end up initially understanding your true business drivers to make any scenario a valid scenario. And I start with the old methodology of the asking 5 whys. And what I mean by that is truly getting under the bonnet of an assumption or a variable that you will be using in your scenarios. And generally, just asking, is that a good thing to do? Most people will say yes. But if you continue to ask why around that, you begin to understand, is it actually relevant to your scenario, or is it something that a person feels is relevant but may not actually be relevant, or things like that. That links quite closely to an age-old concept in particularly in FP&A, between correlation and causation. A lot of people mistake correlation for causation. And what I mean by that is, there's an old example about, ice cream sales and shark bites. They both go up, in the warm weather. And some might actually say one is causing the other if you're just, graphing it or putting it on a graph or something. But it happens that both of those go up during summer, and that's the actual variable. And that's so to find correlation is quite important. And I mean, very recently, even within our own business, and I think many of the people attending the call today, we are in a more flexible work environment. So there's a lot of discussions about people's productivity. Does it improve or increase if they're in office, or if they're working from home or remotely, things like that. And even within my own business, we've done a lot of work trying to understand what are the variables which are correlated as opposed to cause higher productivity when someone's in the office or something like that. And although it sounds simple, when you actually get under the data, it can get quite complicated. The other concept I'd like to introduce is the notion of lead versus lag indicators. Most of us start our forecast with things like revenue, top line sales, all of those. In general terms, those are actually lag indicators. The revenue is generated from a certain event happening, and sales happening and things like that. So your lead indicators, which actually should be understood when you're doing a scenario, may not be your top line sales, right? It might be the number of new clients you're opening in a period, or the projects you have, or even indeed external variables where depending on your industry, maybe things in the market, geopolitical things, they actually lead to either higher or lower sales within your organization. So I would always encourage to also understand not what are those true lead indicators. And sometimes it pays to sort of monitor them, uh, and to actually evaluate what your forecast is doing, and how accurate your forecast is based on your assumptions against some of those lead indicators. And obviously monitoring. So monitoring your drivers, your lead indicators, as I alluded to earlier on, I think the more you talk about these things, the more you sort of embed, your scenarios, your assumptions, what the business think is the drivers, allows you to actually validate them. And then through the year, you might actually realize that you've ignored an important variable, or you need to adjust some of your assumptions and things like that, which then improves the forecast scenarios you do, which then leads, I think, to as my next slide would indicate, um, better relevance. Now, relevance again is sometimes misunderstood. I always think for a forecast to be relevant, obviously it needs to be based on a valid set of assumptions and a valid methodology, and the right business drivers. But then you also, and there's been a wide uh, body of knowledge, and there's lots of discussion out there about how can you improve a financial forecast with cross-functional data. And obviously FP&A has been spoken about even through the FP&A circle quite a lot in the last several years, about the importance and the value adding additional metrics, additional assumptions into your forecasts and your drivers. It improves the relevance of that forecast. And I've just listed out three of the main ones we use. I mean, we are a professional services business. People, workplace, our footprint, office space, things like that. And then how do we measure operational efficiency are the three sort of key things that most professional services organizations would look at, and I think most organizations would look at as well. But when you look at people, it's always, everyone will look at numbers of people. That's the easy one. You'll always forecast how many people you have and how many people you expect to have. But I think that general number becomes far more relevant when you start linking additional attributes of people. And attrition is a more common one. If you have a high attrition rate, that causes operational problems, and you have to forecast for that. You got to build that into your scenario. you know Depending on your business, maybe it's the number of promotions you have in any one year. Is that increasing, decreasing? Leave taken, leave policies, various things around HR. So I think it's becoming far more important that FP&A people and budgeting and planning people, get far more involved with the rest of the business as well. And the same with office space, work patterns, travel time, various things can impact upon, individuals' behaviors and eventually on your top line, number, but once it translates to lower productivity or less available time to work, or, things like that. Uh, the second bit about relevance, I think, is the narrative that a forecast actually, is trying to depict or foster and encourage organizations to use. For a long period of time, it's purely been, net profit, margin, very financy, and most organizations uh, you know, are there or exist for not purely a financial purpose. I mean, there is a strategy, there is a product or a service that they offer, and generally you'll be talking to lots of people who impact the financial forecast, but who are not financial in themselves. They may be less numeric. They might not feel comfortable with, looking at a whole bunch of tables and percentages and graphs and things like that. So I think to make a forecast or a scenario really relevant, you got to understand your audience. Obviously, us or most of us are in finance, so we'll present quite a lot to financial people. Numbers, tables, graphs work well in those contexts. But then when you're presenting a scenario or a plan to your marketing team or your sales team or your operations team, you got to think of the medium that you're using and what narrative you're talking about. Far too often finance is looked as the policeman. We come with bad news, we are always asking for more, then they don't fully engage with the whole budgeting scenario process. Obviously you got to link it to your company strategy as well. And I've just mentioned there that there's a whole ream of work coming down the road with ESG compliance, looking at how your operations impact ESG, corporate citizenship, all of those things, which I think is helping improve the value of having good scenarios and good forecasting techniques, because it's no longer just a financial exercise. And I think, as my counterparts have mentioned already, it has to be easy to generate and timely. And I think the technology is helping, particularly speeding up the timeliness. We're all seeing what AI agents can do and what software can do and how you can capture people's insights and reuse forecast and all of those things. And of course, data is becoming very prevalent. So there's lots of data. We're trying to figure out how best to use that data. Which data should you be using to improve your scenarios? But I think that makes the whole process of generating scenarios and forecasts a lot more relevant. Back to you, Olga.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Harsh, for your presentation and for sharing these simple but very relevant steps for all of us to actually start building our scenarios, understanding our business drivers, and so on. If you have any questions to Harsh or to any other panelist, you can definitely ask them through our chat. Thank you to all of you who are already sending your questions. And that is time for a second polling question of the event. Let me start the second one. So I'll launch it and we will speak about your preferred approach to forecasting. So what is your preferred approach to forecasting? Is it annual budgeting? Is it rolling forecast, driver-based planning, Harsh was speaking a lot about now, or AI-powered modeling? So let's see what are you using now. Let's see where we stand. And obviously, I'm very curious about those results. So what is your preferred approach to forecasting? Is it annual budgeting, rolling forecasts, driver-based planning, or AI-powered modeling? It looks like we have definite winner for this question. Let me end this poll and share the results with everyone. And we have a winner today, that's rolling forecast. So we are moving from annual budgeting, or just having one annual exercise, but having at least, let's say, 12 months in front of us with rolling forecast. Driver-based planning got 29%, so second place. Annual budgeting got 13%, and only 2% rely on AI-powered modeling at this stage. Harsh, what do you think? Are you surprised by the results?
I am actually, to an extent. I thought more people will sort of rely more on the annual budget. I think if you did this survey probably 5 or 10 years ago, lots of people would be just doing an annual budget and sort of, not spending a lot of time on the whole forecasting exercise. I'm quite encouraged that lots more people, on here, more than 50% are going into a rolling forecast. I think it won't be hard. I suppose the difference between driver-based and rolling is also, how do you define that? A lot of the rolling forecast would be changing certain drivers or not all your drivers and things like that. So I think there's a good component, more than 70% here that do regular forecasting. And I'm equally sort of encouraged that anybody is actually doing AI powered sort of modeling. I know there's a lot of discussion around it. Obviously people are beginning to explore it, and the technology is allowing us to do that. So I think as we, if you repeat this sort of forum maybe in a couple of years' time, based on these, I think the annual budget will become less relevant. It'll be far more, rolling, driver-based with AI-powered technologies that you'll start seeing.
Right, right. Let us move on. And actually, we would like to discuss a question with all of our panelists. So please join us on the camera about our skill set. We have spoke about planning and forecasting evolving from, let's say, 10 years ago, having only annual budgeting. We get closer to rolling forecast, driver-based models, to more advanced technology, and that definitely requires new skills. So what skills, in your opinion, FP&A teams need to enhance forecasting effectiveness? And I will start with you, Sean, here. What do you think? What skills do we need?
I think it's about asking the right questions at the right time. So the whys, not only on the numbers and the results, but also on the assumptions that we make in models. So actually, why are we doing this sort of planning cycle? I mean, there's a time and a place for that conversation, maybe not as you're finishing it, but sort of that skill of continuously sort of trying to push the forecast or the design that you have in a better and better direction is you cannot be doing the same thing over and over again and be disappointed in the result. You need to change your approach.
Right, thank you. That's almost philosophical answer. Thank you for that, Sean. Let's move on to you, Bartosz. What do you think? What skills do we need as FP&A professionals to enhance forecasting effectiveness?
Well, I think one of them, the key one, might be the connection to business. So a little bit like on the business partnering side, right? And that connects a little bit to what Sean said, but also to the validity point that Harsh mentioned. Because if you know the business well, you'll know what's sort of the top goal of your company, right? Of the organization. Is it growth of revenue? Is it cost control? Is it market share? And then you will be able to design your scenarios, input parameters much, much better. So I think the connection to business, to understand the the business model and what is top of mind for the organization. I think that is important to keep the forecasts relevant and valid.
Right. Thank you for that thinking. And back to you, Harsh. You have already replied to this question through your presentation, through really understanding business drivers, understanding leading and lagging indicators. But if you want to elaborate, what's exactly skills we need as FP&A teams here?
I think I'll add to what Bartosz and Sean were talking about, but I think it's also the technical skills because traditionally FP&A has been primarily finance individuals, financially qualified, you know, but with the tools evolving, I think all of us are sort of learning new things there. You're reskilling a little bit. And sometimes, particularly in my own team, I'm sort of actually being quite open-minded and encouraging people who are interested in the business, to Artus's point about being a business partner, regardless of, what your academic or technical background is. And, sometimes you get lots of people who come out of like, business analytics or data science or even IT. I don't mean that in a bad way, but there are a lot of IT individuals who want to do something different. They understand the business quite well, and they sort of pick up some of the new tooling a lot easier, and then they become very, in my opinion, very productive FP&A type individuals. So it's I think it's an evolving environment where soon we might not specify that if all FP&A people have to be pure finance people.
Well, exactly. Now, even when you spoke about that, you said people interested in business rather than saying people interested in finance, because exactly
Exactly.
finance, FP&A goes way beyond just finance tasks as we used to see it
Yeah.
before. Amazing answers from all of you. Thanks a lot. And we are moving on to the third presentation of the event. Sean Salminen will be speaking about reduction of risk, effort, and time spent in scenario modeling. Sean, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga. And on this topic, then, so coming from a systems perspective, we talk a lot about what we call spreadsheet reduction as a factor when trying to improve your scenario planning work in organizations. And when we talk about sort of moving away from spreadsheets, it's important to clarify that this doesn't mean replacing spreadsheets completely. Rather, it's about reducing dependency on them. So the goal really is that we any existing smart logic, any good output in existing models, but in a more modern, efficient solution, while never really removing the fallback of playing around in a local spreadsheet or doing conceptual designs in them. But by transitioning into a new system, you can significantly reduce the risk of input errors or what we call data collisions, which are things that are all too common in spreadsheets. For example, when files are saved to network drives, cloud storage, or shared collaboration spaces. It also eliminates the duplication of work and tasks, which can happen when multiple teams are working on separate versions of the same model, but in different files. And additionally, modern solutions can also automate preparation and data population of templates and scenarios, which is a huge time saver and a good way to minimize errors before you even start the actual planning cycle. Beyond that, getting rid of the spreadsheet, moving beyond the spreadsheets, you get performance improvement for the end users. So on one side, that's massive spreadsheets. Everyone knows this. They're performance hog. So moving all the data and heavy processing and calculation away from the end user's computer will make a big difference in sort of the quality of life for that user. And any planning processes that might have been slow in a spreadsheet environment can be sped up significantly by using, for example, modern workflow functionalities and database technologies in a proper solution. And more importantly, it allows for that holistic top-down modeling and adjustments down to a transactional level, something that spreadsheets simply cannot do at scale. So with that in mind, let's move to the next slide and see what happens when you move into a modern FP&A or XP&A solution. Obviously, it offers a lot of benefits. First, it provides you with a very rigorous control over access rights. And with this level of control, authorized users can create, manage all of these alternate budgets, forecasts, simulations, whatever you call them, in just a matter of minutes, and then publish them to a wider audience to analyze when they're complete. And there's real power in these alternate scenarios, and we've been talking about sort of quickly adapting to them. And whether you're working with different budget allocations, changing them around, or testing various forecasts based on changing assumptions, a modern FP&A solution allows you to generate alternate versions without duplicating work or risking errors in your models as you're sort of duplicating or copying them. And in contrast to the limitation of spreadsheets, these modern solutions enable teams to create an unlimited number of scenarios, so regardless of detail or time span, and you can test out different potential outcomes in various periods, whether you're looking at short-term adjustments or maybe long-term projections, and ensure that you're ready really for any eventuality. So let's move and look to 3 core value drivers of moving an organization to a solution like this. First, we have improving efficiency and performance. So one of the most valuable aspects of moving away from spreadsheets is that improvement in efficiency. By using a modern FP&A solution, you're able to streamline processes that once took hours or days in a spreadsheet. With automation built into the system, tasks like updating models, pulling in new data sets, or adjusting templates can be done automatically or via scripts of some sort. And the speed at which scenarios are populated and analyzed is also improved. So users across the organization, it doesn't matter if they're in finance, operations, any other department, they can very quickly create these scenarios, adjust their own assumptions, run simulations, rerun, change assumptions, and do that all basically in real time. And this increased speed, automation, that helps you shorten the planning cycle and reduce what we call time to insight. The second part is the centralized and distributed collaboration. So the flexibility combined with centralized access control in modern FP&A solutions, it also allows for better collaboration across your organization. These alternate scenarios that we have created can, of course, be used in a very traditional way for central top-down reviews that leadership teams can quickly evaluate. They can look at different scenarios, assess potential risks and rewards, and make informed decisions. Allowing for this type of simple starts, like Bartosz also already mentioned, within a tool set is a very normal way for doing sort of top-down adjustments to try out modeling concepts. But at the same time, these scenarios could and should be opened up for analysis throughout the business. So departments can review and analyze them based on their specific areas of responsibility. And you can even open up for them to then do bottoms-up adjustments or maybe challenge the assumptions that you've done in the top-down changes. And this sort of collaborative process ensures that final forecast or budget, whatever you're doing, reflects input from all areas of the business, areas of expertise, and is not just a top-down imposition that you have. So allowing the whole organization to review and report on their own departments, divisions, cost centers, product groups, whatever you call them, and then compare the actuals to the budget or forecast they themselves have set, that will actually foster a sense of accountability over the input that they're doing. They're no longer planning for just the CFO or for the board, they're actually planning for themselves. And then finally, on the unlimited scenarios and flexibility. So that's definitely one of the greatest advantages of moving to a modern FP&A or XP&A solution, is that ability to run these unlimited scenarios. So traditional spreadsheets impose limits on the number of and complexity of the scenarios that you can feasibly manage. So not maybe a technical limit, but whatever you can really get a hold on and have a full view of what's where. But within modern systems, you're free to create as many as you needed. any level of detail, and really any time span, and mix them freely if you want to. And what this means for you is that you can simulate various future outcomes with different assumptions about revenue, cost, key variables within operations. The driver-based thinking is very key here. And for example, you could test multiple economic conditions, so looking at the external world. You could evaluate the impact of new regulations. So within your business sector, there might be new regulations, or just in specific countries. Or you could explore different business strategies within your business over various time periods. So long-term, short-term, what are the effects of doing A, B, or C? And this level of flexibility is really critical when you're planning for the future. And what we already mentioned is a very uncertain and fast-changing environment, especially today. So the ability to simulate a wide range of possibilities gives you far more robust way to prepare for these eventualities and then adapt to these changes very swiftly. Now, let's move and do a quick demonstration of how Toolset can actually create these future scenarios in just a few clicks. So we have a scenario listing, budgets, forecasts, and scenarios that we have in here for the FP&A team. And what we want to do is to quickly run a simulation. So first, what we do is we take a complete copy of our existing budget. So we were going to base this scenario on our budget. And we can see that we have our scenario B and the budget year 2026. And we can then execute and copy these 8,000 rows in the simulation. We can then validate this. So we go back to our little report that we have. We refresh the report, and we have a starting out point for a simulation, a perfect copy of our budget. Now what we're going to do is we're going to recalculate the values according to the assumptions. And we've selected different data sets for 3 cost centers in this scenario. We're going to change the cost center S11. We're going to increase the sales by, let's say, 9%. Then we're going to do S12 by 6.5%. And for the last one, for a specific product category, we're going to do 3%. We're going to execute the simulation. And again, we are ready to do the review by just going into our main report and refreshing that view. And now we can see an instant effect on our simulation. And if we then drill into our cost centers, we can see the full effect of that. We can see our 9% and 6.5%. And for cost center S21, we actually have to dig one level deeper. We'll go into the products, and we can see for that product category, the 3% change. Now, once we've done this simulation, what if we don't want to publish this for everyone? It's just our own little system. So really, any modern tool will allow you to filter those so that the scenario I had done the simulation in will not show those values in my general reporting. So I hope that this quick little demonstration is giving you an insight into how a modern planning solution and planning tool can give you ultimate flexibility in preparing for the uncertainties of the future, speeding up the creation of new scenarios and models in just a few clicks, but at the same time control who is allowed to change, who is allowed to challenge, and who is allowed to report on these future forecasts and models. Thank you, and back to you, Olga.
Thank you, Sean, for your demonstration. It feels like it definitely can be done in less than one day and probably in less than 1 hour, even though changing all the parameters might take time, but definitely not as much as it usually takes us with spreadsheets. Thanks a lot for that. And after your presentation, I have lots of questions. And if you too feel like asking a question, asking Sean a question or any other participants, please send us those. I've been receiving many interesting questions already. Thank you for them. And so far, let's move on to our last polling question for the session, and that's about technology solution. So which FP&A tech solution do you use the most? So let me share this poll with you and launch it for everyone. So what options do we have here? Which tech solutions we use the most? Spreadsheets, Obviously, ERP-based tools, BI reporting solutions, or specialized FP&A tools. I'm really interested in how the votes will split this time. Probably some combination of those, but choose the most frequent one, the main one for you. So what FP&A tech solution do you use the most? Spreadsheets, ERP-based tools, BI reporting solution, or specialized FP&A tools? Let's end this poll because it looks like we already have results here, and let me share that with everyone. We have an absolute winner. Drum roll, no surprise, spreadsheets. Definitely 57% of votes here. And obviously, no one wants us to get rid of spreadsheets completely. We just want to shift slightly the workload from spreadsheets to some other tools. Second place, 21% goes to specialized FP&A tools, 12% go to BI reporting solutions, and 10% to ERP-based tools. Sean, what do you think? Are you surprised by the results?
I'm not surprised, but I think I like the insight in it, and it reflects really sort of a different movement in this sector. Is that, and these are really in the order of what I would say complexity and capability. So I would say a lot of organizations are moving from spreadsheets and where they previously might have been reliant on the capabilities of ERPs to allow for a bit of budget input and a bit of reporting. And even those tools are stepping up their game, but a lot of organizations are jumping from number one to number four. And I think this is actually reflecting it. So BI reporting solutions, great for reporting, but typically will not give you without additional add-ons that full flexibility. And then organizations will choose a one sort of capable solution to work with their data sources. So not surprised, but still interesting to see. And I think we have the right people on this webinar watching today.
Right. Thank you for that comment. And it brings us to the last discussion of this event, and that is about a piece of advice you would give to organizations still relying heavily on spreadsheets. So please, Bartosz, Harsh, join us here on the camera. We'll discuss that painful issue, how to move away from spreadsheets. Bartosz, let me start with you. What advice would you give to organizations still relying heavily on spreadsheets?
Well, I think as Sean mentioned, it's difficult and probably even not purposeful to move away from them fully. It's probably rather to define, what to use them for. Because as already said, probably for short-term modeling, for like short-term analysis and some experimentation, I think spreadsheets are great. It's just when you have then defined what you really want, if you have sort of carved your final version of the Excel or spreadsheet in stone, that's probably the moment to think about, okay, how do we institutionalize this a little bit? How do we go away from the flexibility and limit a little bit the authorizations and control a little bit who can do what? So I think that's the point in time when you have to start thinking about how to move away from the spreadsheets.
Right. Thank you for this answer. And let me move on to you, Harsh. What do you think? How we can move away from spreadsheets? What piece of advice you can give to all of us?
Yeah, I think spreadsheets are quite hard to move away from, particularly if you built your own models. So lots of us have built our own models and we trust the models and things like that. But I think as you become bigger, or as the firm becomes bigger, and you have to deal with more teams, deal with more different regions and things like that. One, it's quite hard to govern that everyone will use your spreadsheet the way you originally designed it, or you wanted to use it. And then, personally, I've always struggled to understand whether, when you had to validate things and when you had to have multiple tabs in a spreadsheet and multiple links in a spreadsheet, how do you actually, so you end up spending a lot of time trying to ensure that, particularly when you're rolling over a spreadsheet, that everything has been updated and all the links have been updated and all of these things. So I think that time efficiency and the control that some of the newer tools are bringing and the structure that it brings sort of facilitates us moving away from spreadsheets for the more industrial purposes. I think for ad hoc analysis, for individual one-off scenarios, and you're testing something and you want to check something, I think personally I still use lots of spreadsheets, right? And I think that's going to be there. But I think it's for those, as Bartosz says, where it's a corporate plan, and you are trying to get more structure around it, and you're trying to control how people use the model. That's where I think some of the tools are becoming more useful than the old large spreadsheets. And it's also with data, some of the spreadsheet models are getting really big, right? And it's holding lots of multiple years of data and all of these things, where you can't email them, you can't store them in shared folders and all of these things. So I think we are getting to, particularly depending on your own organization size, where if you're still quite small and things like that, probably spreadsheets are fine. But as you get bigger, it becomes quite difficult to even operationally manage spreadsheets sometimes. Yeah.
Right. Scary picture you're painting there, Harsh. Like, imagine when all these people leave, like what will happen with my spreadsheets. Sean, what can we do? How can we move away from spreadsheets?
Well, I think it's always a question of good timing, and sort of, I would say that the whole question about building models and having them is fine. I think if you're in the situation that you can't move away today, is to make sure that you document the functionality in the spreadsheets and what you're doing, because that's really the critical point. Is sometimes you have the sort of a single person or a group of people who have created these models, and if they leave and something breaks, a lot of the time it's not properly documented, and you've just been working on somebody's good memory of building that. So I would say the first thing you should do is sort of make sure that any business critical spreadsheets are well documented in the document. Outside of it, just make sure that it's in there. But I would like to sort of really circle back to Bartosz's sort of, when you have a well working model in a spreadsheet, and this is something that I come across with a lot of our customers and prospective customers and people that I meet, that we talk about this. And it's a very common quote that we have an Excel model. It's been working well for so long. It's perfect. It does everything. And then my question is, then why not formalize that? Why not, I think the word was, institutionalize that? It's no point in having it in the ultimate flexibility, which is a spreadsheet with really no limits. Let's take the logic and move that, of course, when it's a good time. But I think it's a backwards logic to, we have a perfect model in Excel. It should be, let's take that and make something even better out of it.
Right, that's really nice way of thinking about it. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone, for your answers. And it brings us to key takeaways section of the event. That's my favorite one. That's when I ask each of you to think, to reflect on what we had today, and select one idea you would like us to remember, you would like the audience to take away with them. What can that be? It's absolutely okay to repeat something from your own presentation, or just grab an idea somehow floating in the air today. Bartosz, what do you think? What is the idea you want us to remember?
Well, obviously, I'll pick on my presentation. I would say you can start small, you can start now, and start on a journey that once you decide on a tool to implement, the organization is somehow ready and the process is embedded, and you can actually implement maybe a better tool or better implement the tool because you know what you want. So I would pick on that.
Exactly. That's a great idea to remember. Harsh, what do you think? What we should remember from this event? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. For me, it's mainly having people with really good business acumen, because I mean, tools and things like that do, change, evolve. You need to be flexible, be able to use it. But I think having that ingrained knowledge, and whether it's an FP&A team or a business partnering team, or whatever you choose to call it, those business professionals who can actually help an organization, help leadership understand the key drivers that you need to sort of use and change to get the business somewhere. That needs to be reflected in your scenarios and budgeting planning. So spend time developing those business teams who can manage your models for you.
True. Understanding the business becomes extremely crucial when we get to scenario planning. That's true. Sean, what do you think? What we should remember from today's event?
Well, I think the sort of the topic or the part that we all sort of touched on, I've sort of put it together, and I sort of make sure that your plans are sort of relevant and timely. I think that's really the point. Is if you make a plan that's relevant but is taking too long to make, you're probably going beyond the window where it's useful for you, so it becomes irrelevant. And at the same time, making something quickly but doesn't give you really the insight, the granularity, or really pulls in on the knowledge within the organization. You're just doing something very quickly, top down, without asking people around what your assumptions should be. It just makes it's quick, but does it actually help you? So if you lose either part of that equation, it's you're just doing work for that doesn't probably help you. So I would say make it relevant, make it timely, not either or neither.
Right, and I'm pretty sure if there was someone out there counting how many times we used each word, the word relevant will be a winner today, and that's indeed a crucial term for scenario planning and scenario management. It needs to be relevant for decision making. Otherwise, like, what's the point of the exercise? And let's stay relevant to our audience today and answer some of their questions they've been sending to us throughout the event. I'll start with you, Harsh, and we received lots of questions during your presentation. So let me start with the one that's actually captured attention a lot, and that's about how you pick up people for your team. So the question goes like that. Your idea of FP&A and financial business partnering being non-finance people is very inspirational and a new approach. How do you get finance managers to change their mentality of hiring non-traditional people, not non-traditionally finance people?
Uh, I think it's also, well, it probably starts, with an open discussion with the finance managers themselves, right? I mean, uh, it depends on the role of the team, and particularly my team is becoming more business savvy. So that sort of helps. For example, if you're talking to a tax team, then I think they would sort of say you got to have traditional accounting background and tax people and all of those things. But particularly your business partnering, FP&A teams, operational finance teams, personally, I think it's a very sort of a relevant discussion to have with those managers, saying, are you sort of gearing your team for success by only having a certain type of individual, right? It sort of limits the ideas, it limits the innovation. You're always having a sort of a repetitive discussion because most people are comfortable having a certain type of discussion, whereas and I think it's not only your personal experience but diversity is a big thing as well. You got to mix your teams up, you got to have different cultural backgrounds in there. I think all of those feed into a very productive sort of business finance team. And as leaders and as managers, I think you got to be open to that, and also sort of highlight where a diverse multi-skilled team is performing better than one that's less so, right? So I think it's always it's useful to see the results of teams that are set up like that.
Right, right. Results actually speak for themselves. Great answer, Harsh. Thank you for that. And let me address a question to Sean, and that's about data quality issues. We all have data quality issues, and the question is how to understand if the quality issues we have are critical or non-critical for scenario planning. How to decide?
Well, I would say it's usually the really obvious data quality issues will come up even if you're still in a spreadsheet phase, is that you look at your reports and you think the thought, oh, I wish I could do this, but I'm restrained because I've incomplete mapping across, let's say, my product set, or I cannot match my sales data set with my general ledgers, or really, if you feel that you're jumping from one source to then make assumptions and jump into the other one, but you can't really do a perfect match, I would say then you have that question. And we work a lot with customers that don't realize the sort of low level data quality issues until they actually try the power of combining multiple data sets in a single tool set, because they've been working at such a level that it's it's never become a problem. So it's when you really start challenging and sort of seeing the power of a system, that's when it becomes obvious. So it's sort of a chicken and egg problem, in the sense that if you're not really using your data powerfully, you might skate along even if you have data quality issues. But when you start doing that, you might actually find that there are some hidden secrets in your data sets. So you're never going to run away from this problem, sadly. You have to face it.
Right, right. Thank you for that. Bartosz, a question for you. How do you ensure your scenario planning remains relevant? You see, relevant comes up again in changing market conditions. So let's say the market has completely changed. Competition is doing something completely crazy. How do you make sure that your scenario planning still kind of captures that?
That's a good question. I think it depends a little bit on the market you're in, because from my experience, there are markets that make it where it's easier to get the competitive information, right? To get information about what your competition is doing. And there are markets where that is much more difficult. So I think first of all is to make sure you have relevant and trusted data on what the competition is actually doing, because in some cases even the market share is difficult to get. So I think data quality, especially its external data quality, when it comes to what's happening on the market, that is key. And then, well, your scenarios would have to be then targeted to respond to these changed inputs, right? So probably when I spoke about the categorization of the input parameters, if you want to measure, how are you doing versus the market when the market is changing a lot, you'd probably have to have more than one and reliable input parameters that you can change, adapt, and tweak to see the outputs on your plan, P&L, whatever. So I think, well, to summarize this, to have a really good trusted source of data and define the parameters that describe the markets you're in, and then, well, to have a good model that translates this into the output.
Right, right. So not a simple solution, but something to strive for. Thank you for this answer. And I'm moving back to you, Harsh, with another question. Again, someone was listening to you very attentively, and that relates to the polling question you commented upon. So regarding preferred approach to forecasting, majority answered rolling forecast, like myself, like the person who's answering, or who's asking the question. However, in parallel, we still do annual budgeting. So we would prefer to move on to rolling forecast, but what are the key elements to persuade the organization to move to rolling forecast, or just in general to move away from annual budgeting to more advanced forecasting approach?
Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting question because in my own organization, we do both as well. And we always use the annual budget as sort of a baseline or as an indicator to the markets, indicator to key stakeholders about this is our overall trajectory. And it also is a, particularly when you're looking at, things like, revenue planning or remuneration planning and bonuses and things like that, you got to sort of have fixed windows. So I think annual plans, annual budgets are not going to go away. My belief, though, and what I'm trying to push, even in the organization I'm in, is it shouldn't be a separate exercise to your rolling forecast. So effectively, if you do your rolling forecast well, you can sort of choose which 12-month period becomes your annual budget, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a separate exercise. So I think for too long, I mean, I've been doing forecasting for many years now, and we sort of spend 3 months of a year doing an annual budget, but you start your forecast in the middle of your annual budget cycle as well. So you end up having to do two exercises towards the end of finalizing your budget, and you sort of already know that your annual budget is slightly off because your rolling forecast is telling you something else, right? So I think it's trying to sort of prevent those sort of for one, timeliness. If you take 3 months to do a budget, then how valuable or how useful is that budget? And then if you can make it so that it's a constant exercise, but you choose the components of that um, piece of work, where will you use it for your banks, will you use it for your external investors, all of those sort of things. And you probably will still term it an annual budget, but I think you don't need to have that same exercise of doing everything bottom up, and all of the things that we do, trying to get a once a year annual budget.
Right, right. That's a nice evolution process, really eventually getting to something else and call it still an annual budget. Let's move on to you, Sean. Actually, I have picked up a second question for you, but you have touched it already in your first answer, and that relates to data consistency. So someone who is using multiple FP&A tools is asking, how can organizations ensure data consistency across multiple FP&A tools and systems?
So this is really, I think there's always going to be a sense of somebody putting in the work and validating. So it doesn't matter if it's multiple FP&A systems, multiple ERPs. We see that a lot with businesses that are sort of very acquisitive, buying new smaller companies multiple times a year or every now and again. It's always a data question. So we always get this sort of pushback, is that, oh, we're currently in a situation where we have our main ERP and it's going to take 6 months to bring that into a new company we bought. But it could be really any tool set. It could be your CRM, it could be payment system, it could be really anything. And it's always about sort of 90% is preparation. So making sure that if there's illogical mappings that you need to put together, do you have an FP&A tool, or sort of in the FP&A tool set, do you have functions to set the rules? And then you will always want to do some reconciliation on if it's differing chart of accounts, if it's mapping cost centers, whatever it may be. Is really, it doesn't have to be complex. It's really, does this make sense after I pushed it through a mapping exercise or a allocation exercise, whatever it is we're trying to do. So I would say I think the old construction adage of measure once and measure 3 times and cut once is really the same within data sets. Is that, look at the logic, design it, and prepare, and then you start moving the data sets, and you validate afterwards. There's no cheat here, apart from the fact that you can cut away some of the manual work in there, but the design still has to make sense.
Right, Right. Thank you, Sean. Let me ask another question for Bartosz, and that relates to really how companies can move from reactive to proactive scenario planning. So really, and maybe that's connected to what Harsh was speaking about as well, really kind of moving to leading indicators more. So not to just kind of creating scenario when bad things have already happened, but how to avoid them in future.
Yes, well, I think by definition, scenario would look into the future and would be based on assumptions. What if, what happens if the future is different? And especially here, if you want to particularly move from reactive to proactive, you'd have to look at, as you said, leading indicators, right? And these leading indicators then would have to be external to the organization, right? So and they are probably mostly the most difficult ones to define and to get reliable data about. But the best leading indicators in this case would again be external to the company, would be about what the competition is doing, where the market is going, what's the cost price levels outside. It would be external indicators. So I think the key there would be to develop a good understanding what are these external indicators and trying to build a good data source, good reliable data source, to channel the data into your model.
Right. Thank you, Bartosz. And I have one more question, but I'll ask each one of you to reply that. And this question I have received actually multiple times in different forums. So I'll start with you, Sean. And the question goes like that. What are the main obstacles in implementing scenario planning organization phase or you have faced on the way and how to avoid them? So main obstacles in deploying scenario planning in organization.
I think I often get also this sort of going into implementation projects is that what should we be looking out for? Is there, is it a system that we're using? Is it, where what we have, sort of what we're doing in our models? Is there some risk with that? I think the main risk is always not winning over the hearts and minds of the people that are going to work with the system. So people can get it's always about people, process, and product. But you could have the best process in the world, you could have the best product in the world, but if people aren't on board, if they don't share your vision and what we're going to do, it doesn't matter what you're doing in the rest of it. So it's really about making sure that, I think, really what Bartosz has been talking about, it's starting simple and getting the core idea out there and everyone aligned with this actually makes sense, it brings us value, get them aboard early and get them excited, really. Change can be scary. And for some people, change can mean, what they've been doing comfortably for a year, for 10 years, however, um, they might resist it. So change resistance is a real thing. And I think it's probably, I would say, the biggest singular uh, hurdle that we come across in sort of what separates a project from a success to less of a success, if we say it that way.
Thank you for this answer, Sean. And Bartosz, what do you think? What are the biggest obstacles in implementing scenario planning?
Yeah, I was thinking about this as Sean spoke, and I think I would sort of describe it in sort of one or two words as perceived complexity. So basically, I think you hear more and more about scenario planning in the sort of FP&A community, but it always comes with those specific, systems and some data quality issues and these kind of things. And I think perceived complexity is pretty high. So people think, oh, I would like to use it, but wow, it comes with all those different challenges that we need to solve, and it might feel a bit overwhelming, I guess. And this would then implementing scenario planning would then obviously come on top of the usual, well, daily FP&A work, the planning, the forecasting, the reporting, the budgets, the annual budgets, maybe the rolling forecast, and so on and so on. So I think this is probably one of the hurdles, the perceived complexity. And if there is a way to break down this complexity into smaller steps, or into simpler approaches, or into somehow make people feel it would be easier, or maybe a phased approach, something like that, I think that probably might ease the difficulty to cross that hurdle.
Right, right. That's very nice angle, Bartosz. Thank you for that. And let's move on to you, Harsh. What do you think? What are the biggest obstacles on the way and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, I agree with Bartosz, and I always sort of say it's the three C's, right? Complexity, culture, and competence. So it's not in directly in that order, depending on your organization, they switch around. But if you don't have the right people, or if you have a very complex thing, or the culture of the organization is not attuned to having that sort of mentality, then I mean, to be fair, it's quite difficult to implement any process, but certainly a scenario planning and forecasting in that methodology is in that sort of context is quite difficult.
Right. Thank you for all the frameworks. Thank you for all great answers. Now, what's left for today is to invite our audience to the two upcoming events. We are going to have an FP&A online, FP&A Trends webinars, one in March, one in April. The first one on March 26th is devoted to modern FP&A, frameworks, foundations, and enablers. And another one on April 2nd will be about transforming FP&A trends into real impact strategies for 2025. So mark those dates in your calendars. It's definitely worth attending. Besides that, let me invite you to participate in our 2025 FP&A Trends Survey. You see, we actively quoting last year results and we are already collecting new ones. This survey will take you only 10-12 minutes to complete, and in return, you will be among the first ones to receive the final report. This QR code will lead you to the right place. So please do that. We'll definitely appreciate this. I would like to thank our sponsor, our technology sponsor, Mercur, for making this event possible and to share all this information with you. Besides that, there are many ways you can connect to us, to FP&A Trends global community. You can definitely subscribe to our FP&A Trends Digest here. You can join our LinkedIn group and follow Larissa Melnichuk on LinkedIn personally. You can follow our YouTube channel, and obviously you can follow us on platform X as well. So many ways, choose the one that works for you. I would like to thank everyone who joined this event live. I would like to thank you for all great questions you sent to us during the session. And the biggest thank you definitely belongs to our panelists, Bartosz, Sean, Harsh. Thanks a lot for sharing your practical tips, for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day. Have a great rest of the week and see you at one of the upcoming events. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.